You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
Try to spice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, weekly art history for all ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and today I am very excited. My guest is an expert on one of those fields that, frankly, I know nothing about, because while I love and appreciate art in all of its forms, I am not a fashionista. I am like the cliche of a middle-aged dude in the suburbs. I'm a sitcom dad brought to life, or as my wife affectionately refers to me, the before shot of an infomercial. But my guest today is Tembe Denton-Hurst, beauty and culture writer for New York Magazine, also writer of the newsletter Extracurricular. Author of Homebodies, has a new book called Fresh Sets, which tells us all about nail art, the history and contemporary practices. Thank you so much for coming to join me.
Thank you for having me, Kyle. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Like I said, you're doing a lot of things. Did I capture all of that in the intro?
Yes, I also have a biscuit business, which is kind of a non sequitur and unrelated because it doesn't have anything to do with cooking. But yeah, I'm all over the place. I do a lot of things.
Okay, but cooking, another art form that I wish I were proficient at. I do appreciate art in all its forms. That's why this show from the very beginning has not only covered, the Renaissance greats and the stuff you see in the museum, but I've done episodes on OK Go. I've done episodes on Andrew Fuller from the classic Is It Cake, the Netflix hit. I love art in all its forms. And one of my favorite things is learning from people who are smarter than I am. So I want to start off. Can you just give us a little bit of, actually, before I get into the history of nail art and stuff like that, can you just tell us a little bit about your book, when it's coming out? And for listeners interested, check the links in the show notes. I'm going to have all that so you can buy a copy. But can you tell us, like, what propelled you to want to write this book and the story you're telling in here?
Yeah, so it was kind of a divine opportunity in a way. Prestel reached out and was like, hey, we're really interested in doing nail things. They kind of knew that I was interested in nail stuff. And they were like, would you be open? And I said, yes. I was really excited about it. I'm a big nail person. It's always been an art form that I've been passionate about, and one that since I became a beauty editor back in, I want to say 2018 now, 2017. Since I became an editor, it's a category that I've watched grow. And so, it just really was a very synergistic, symbiotic fit. So yeah, the book is out April 8th, wherever books are sold. And yeah.
Okay. So, you've been interested in nail art, and forgive my ignorance here. I've obviously seen a fair amount of nail art, but it's like all things related to fashion. Like, I am a standard like jeans and black hoodie guy all day, every day. But I know there's more to it than just like pretty colors on somebody's nails. Can you tell me a little bit about the history? Like, how did people even begin painting their nails? Like, how far back does this go? And a little bit about like the cultural significance, which I guess is probably a loaded question because there are a whole lot of cultures involved here.
Yeah, so to start, there's a lot of cultures involved. And I think, as far back as the mummies, we saw that mummies had gilded nails and hennaed hands, so it's a very, very ancient practice. But I think in the more modern iteration, they kind of cite the modern manicure starting somewhere around 1870s-ish in Paris. But those weren't the kind of flashy manicures that you would think about when you think about like a really complex nail art, more about beautification of the hands. And so, like people have always, I think, been interested in adornment in every sphere, in every part of the body. But nail specifically has like evolved over time. So 1877 in Paris, and then a couple years later, in 1917, Q-Tex launched a clear lacquer, which is the nail polish that we think of. And then after that, fast forward to the 1920s, the French makeup artist Michel Minard released the first bottle of colored nail polish, which was inspired by high gloss car paint. And so then that's kind of when you start to see the kind of looks, like that's the
Yeah.
beginnings of like nail art as we think about now.
So then when you talk about, nail art and car paint, I start to think about toxicity because like
Yeah.
one of the rabbit holes that I love to go down is like all the crazy stuff that has happened with like arsenic in paints and
Yeah.
I did an episode on killer wallpaper with Shields Green. Please tell me they were not using actual car paint on people's nails.
I don't think they were using actual car paint on people's nails. I mean, maybe some people were just using whatever because I think people are resourceful and sometimes will just use things for like off-label purposes. But yeah, no, it was just like kind of mimicking that finish with the nail polish. Although there's been things over the years. I mean, even when you look at acrylic, which is, what's used to extend the nail, which was actually created by a dentist, which I think is really, really fun. Fred Slack, he like cut his fingernail or like it chipped off and he just like, used the acrylic that was in his office in a piece of aluminum foil and tried to like rebuilt the thumbnail, and that's kind of where we started with the acrylic form, and like it just has evolved since then. And so yeah, I mean the ingredients in acrylics not great. And so there's been a lot of evolution and more discussion, especially now, about non-toxic nail polishes, non-toxic formulas, more, extensions that are healthier for the nail. I think one of the most interesting innovations probably in the past 10 years is Apres, which is it's a different kind of like nail extension, which is, it functions similar to an acrylic, but it's just like preformed, and that's made from gel and instead of being made from like that acrylate, which is supposed to be healthier for the nail bed. So yeah, toxicity. I mean, there's a lot of conversations around all the ingredients in beauty, but there's been a lot of evolution as I think the bigger, clean, non-toxic beauty movement has picked up speed. I think we're seeing that in every facet of the beauty routine, including nails.
That's interesting. Now, I absolutely love the just sort of MacGyver-esque invention of the acrylic nails, but I'm curious as we think about like the history of a lot of art forms. I often feel like trends in the visual arts tend to be a reflection of the society and the cultures that produced them. And I'm curious how you've seen that play out. Like as you've researched this book and you've seen different ways that nails have been decorated and, painted, polished, however you describe it, across different cultures, different time periods. What are some of the trends or different approaches that you've seen that have stood out to you, that might be significant or might signify something going on more broadly than just the nails?
Yeah, so I think thinking about nail length has been really, really interesting because to do an acrylic set in like pre 1970, it was just like incredibly expensive. It wasn't something that was affordable really. So long nails were kind of the domain of like wealthier women. So that would be who would be in the salon getting these acrylic sets, because I think they were still around like $70 back then, which is a lot more money than they are now. And so what was really interesting is that, nail art became more democratized, and women of all socioeconomic statuses were able to wear longer nails. Once there was like this big burst of Vietnamese entrepreneurship in the space due to like when Saigon fell to communism, and we like had a big influx of Vietnamese people in the country, and they were in these like camps of sorts. The actress Tippi Hedren actually, she brought her nail artist. At the time, her name was Dusty Coots. She brought her to the camps and ended up teaching the women how to do manicures, how to do acrylics, and that like really created an explosion of nail salons and shifted who was able to get them. And so what was really interesting is that wealthier women kind of moved away from really long nails and then back into shorter nails. And then it kind of, long nails became, a different, like signified with a different group and like a different socioeconomic class because of the democratization. So I think what was really interesting about that is that, the way that these kind of status signifiers shift and move based on accessibility. So yeah, that was something really interesting that I found during my during my research. And then also if we look at hip hop culture in the late 90s, early 2000s, what I found really fascinating as well is just that like flash and the money and all of that was like really a part of it, really made its way to nails. I think one of the most famous examples is Little Kim had this like money manicure where she cut up pieces of money and stuck it in her nails, and then they painted over that. And it caused so much drama that the US Treasury like released a statement saying that money is not meant to be cut up, because everyone was very up in arms about the fact that she did that manicure. But it was really iconic. And I remember a couple years ago, I'd gone to a salon and this nail tech was telling me he's been doing nails for many, many years. And he was saying that after that, women were coming to he was like, yeah, back in the day, I used to cut up dollars and put it in people's nails. So it really became something that people were replicating. And I think it was all about the flash and kind of this, if you're cutting up money, it kind of says, oh, I can do that. Like, I don't need the dollar because I can put it in my nails. And so I think it kind of spoke to this, just really in line with the way that hip hop was moving, which was like a lot of money is flowing into hip hop now as hip hop is becoming more popular. And so then we're seeing that expression even in the nail art too.
Yeah, in some ways it feels like it's almost a statement that like, I've made it, I have money to burn or to cut up and put into my nails. And I'm curious, are really long nails almost in some ways a statement along similar lines? Because I just like my nails are practically non-existent, and the thing that I always am like afraid of as my nails get the slightest bit of length to them is breaking a nail and stuff like that. And so I wonder, is there some association with that as well? It's like, I have the time, the resources to care for these nails, and, I'm not using, or is that just me reading too much into something?
No, I think that that's accurate. And I think especially when it was kind of the domain of wealthier women, that was definitely the case. I do think that as it became more democratized and became popular in, African American and Latino communities where maybe there wasn't so much wealth, but it was about the the appearance and the aesthetic, I think you kind of adapt. Like, I know people who, like, I have long nails, I go to the gym with them, I do everything with them. And I think because it feels like a cultural identifier for me, or I feel like part of a community where this is just one way of expressing our fashion sense. Because I remember growing up and like the woman driving the bus could have the longest nails you'd ever seen. So it's interesting how I think it just, once it becomes part of the culture, people just work around it. But yeah, I think if people were doing incredibly physical work, like I remember one time I tried to go to a pottery class and I could not, I just kept poking holes in the clay. So I would assume that if you're like gardening and doing things that are really physical and like require your hands, people really probably can't keep up with it. But yeah, I mean, I've seen people of lots of different jobs do it with really, really long nails. Sometimes I'm surprised. I'm like, I don't know how you do this, but people make it work.
Yeah, and maybe that's just a peculiarity of my own particular line of work, because in my day job, I am ripping up chunks of clay and stuff like that to distribute to small children. So I cannot fathom living with longer nails, but to each his or her own. Now, I do want to start to shift our conversation. So after a short break, I want to go from the general to the specific, and we're going to talk about one of the artists and some of the work that's featured in your book. I am back with Tembe Denton-Hurst, a beauty and culture writer for New York Magazine and author of the new book, Fresh Sets, available from all major booksellers starting on April 8th? 8th. 8th. I got it right. For once, I got a date right. And I wanted to talk to you. I always feel like, specificity is where things start to take shape and like make sense to me. And so I wanted to talk about a specific work instead of just broadly how beautiful nails can be. You have a whole lot of photographs of a number of different artists creating beautiful work in your book. I'm wondering, could you pick out one that you would like to share with the audience that you think looks particularly interesting or has a story behind it that will help us to understand and appreciate the work.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Leslie Aranaga. She's an artist based out of LA, and the moment I saw her work, I was like, she has to be included in the book. I knew that that was one who I was really, really excited about. Um, what I really like about Leslie's work is that it's so rooted in her heritage and also rooted in nostalgia, but feels very new and cool. She's not necessarily using traditional nail art techniques. Like, well, she is in some cases, but she's also building on that and like incorporating a lot of modern things. Like right now in nail art, what's becoming really popular among the nail artists is creating these kind of sculptures on the nail. So she did one where she recreated some of her old birthday cakes using like acrylic and using this hard gel, which is really, really modern. But then she's juxtaposing that with stickers that you might have found on like a Lisa Frank stationery from the 90s. And I think that that juxtaposition is really interesting. And the kind of practice of making something, harkening back to something old, but like using new materials. I think there's this really interesting tension there. That I don't know, I find her work really, really inspiring. And I love that she brings storytelling to her nail art. I think it offers people context and is also like a really beautiful celebration of the form.
I think that's really interesting. So I have a couple of questions. So you said she's recreating her birthday cake, like her old birthday cake. So it's a personal connection there. Is she sculpting these cakes that I see stuck on there, or are those like ready-made objects?
She's sculpting those, yeah.
She is sculpting them. And that is interesting. So does she do that like now I'm going to be asking you about process, and you may not necessarily know all of this stuff, but I'm just like, as the art nerd, I'm curious. Like,
yeah.
is she like creating her own molds? Like, is she making like a wax mold, like a wax piece that then is cast, and then she can pour in you said acrylic or some other resin or something like that? Like,
yeah.
Do you know what her process is for that?
I'm not totally sure about her process. I'm assuming that it's an acrylic because the other artists that I've talked to, they've mentioned that they will use it like they will build using acrylic or using like a hard gel. And some people do use molds. It was interesting. I mean, a few of the other artists I've spoken to say that they use like 3D printing to kind of, conceptualize and molds and things like that. So I'm assuming that she's either going to just like freehand some rectangles and, then paint from there. Yeah, I mean, I'm not totally sure, but I'm assuming that it is acrylic and nail polish to like kind of give it that like shiny lacquered look.
Okay, so it's like so now I'm picturing it's like this gelatinous, like semi-solid, slightly plastic form. And I mean plastic in the sense of being like shapeable, moldable. We talk about plasticity of a medium. And so she's kind of building that form onto a nail, and then she adds these stickers. It is interesting, the juxtaposition. Like it feels so much like my childhood.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't wearing nails like this, but the Lisa Frank style stickers and stuff, like, while I didn't have it on my Trapper Keeper, like plenty of classmates did. Like this, I'm seeing, and it feels like the 80s, 90s to me, in the best possible way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm just really, the storytelling aspect of it, I think, is what really makes it special to me. And I think I'm just really inspired by the ability to use nails to tell more about your personal history. Like looking at her nail sets, I can get a sense of how she grew up, what she cared about, what was interesting to her, how she felt about her childhood. I really loved all of her religious iconography stuff that she uses as kind of a stand-in for growing up in LA and growing up in a Mexican household. And I think someone whether you can appreciate it if you're outside of her community, but I think if you're part of her community, you feel a sense of connection to her, which I really, really love. And, nails are so much about beautification, but I think it's really interesting to take that a step further and then to make it hyper personal and to the point that it's not necessarily even wearable. Like a lot of her, like those, the cakes, for example, you can't like function. Like there are limits to the functionality, I think, of a nail set. And so when you see these kind of big sculptures on a nail, we can assume that they're not, this is not the nails that you're going to wear and just like go to the grocery store and do all the things because it's heavy and it's not really practical. But I love this idea of it not having to like this. It's using the small surface of the nail to do all of this, all of this artistry, I guess is the word to use there. Yeah, I think it's really cool that they're like transforming these very tiny canvases into these really bigger concepts.
Well, and I think there's something really interesting in this somewhat like there's this almost like dual nature to it where, it's incredibly personal. As you talked about her symbols of her life and her family life and what is meaningful to her, but then it's that personal history is worn on the exterior and it's made visible for everybody. And it's a personal history that is laid out through extremely recognizable symbols. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you talked about the religious iconography. I mean, obviously there are few symbols that are less recognizable than a cross. I mean, we see that all the time, and it's the Lisa Frank style stuff that is obviously was made for mass marketing and everything. There's something interesting to me about creating art that is highly personal and also for public viewing and and fashion, that intersection of stuff that is to me simultaneously intimate and exposed.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So yeah, that's why I picked her. I was like, I just think she's doing something really, really powerful and something really, really cool. Yeah, I think she's also really representative of where I think the art form is going in some ways, which is is personalization and doing something that's very custom to you. I think 5 years ago, we went through a phase where there were these kind of very defining looks and aesthetics that everybody wanted to create. And I think people are now feeling freer as the form expands and grows to do things that feel really custom to them, exciting to them, tell some kind of story, speak to heritage or interests in one way or another.
So I'm curious, how did you discover her and all the other people in the book? Like, what is your process for discovering all these different nail artists? Like, is it just word of mouth? You're hearing about these things? Are you seeing stuff and people talking on social media or other places? Like, how did you encounter her and this artwork?
Yeah, so it was a lot of social media, but then also I sent out a questionnaire to the artists and asked them who they were inspired by and who they felt were really interesting to them. So it was a little bit of a mix of word of mouth and then also polling some friends and being like, who do you think is cool? So yeah, it was kind of a little bit of everything, but I liked the idea of a little bit of an daisy chain in a way where artists were recommending other artists, because there are a lot of people who are really technically sound and really doing really beautiful work. And especially if I was to go into a salon, I'd be like, oh yes, I want this tech. She does a great job. But I was also curious about who is at the forefront and thinking really expansively about about nails and not necessarily just good at painting or good at replicating a design, because that happens a lot too. Is, you'll see something on Pinterest and you can take it into the salon and say, hey, this is the nails I want, but it doesn't necessarily credit the artist, and it doesn't take away from what your tech is doing. But I really wanted to talk to nail artists who were at the forefront and pushing the boundaries of what nail art could do, or just had really big ideas about what they wanted to see on a nail.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because the hardest part of art is generating the idea,
Absolutely.
I mean, there are so many skilled people who can render beautifully, but generating that or having that vision for what to create is the hardest part. And yeah, this is absolutely beautiful work. And the book is full of absolutely beautiful work and a variety of different visions of what nails and nail art could be. Now, after one last short break, I'm going to get your sort of final thoughts and the insights that you've learned from all of this exhaustive research and looking at so many different artists and their work. We're back with Tembe Denton-Hurst, writer for New York Magazine and author of the new book, Fresh Sets, out in all the bookstores starting April 8th. You've researched a whole lot for this book. You've seen so many different artists. You have shared amazing history going back like thousands of years to mummies having painted nails. I'm curious, what are some things that maybe surprised you as you did this research? What was something unexpected you stumbled across?
I think what was really unexpected to me was learning about how, the nail sector came to be dominated by a lot of Vietnamese folks. I thought that was really, really compelling and interesting. I think when you're born into a timeline that's later than the one that, you're just born into a historical moment, you don't necessarily know the history. You just kind of know what you've experienced. And so to understand that, this was this really difficult moment in our collective history ended up creating like an economic engine for an entire group of people, I think was really, really interesting to me.
Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah.
You talked about how a number of people came over to the U.S. and everything like that as Saigon fell. But was there something specific about the time that drew so many people to the nail industry? Was it, doors being closed in other industries and sort of necessity? Was there something else going on that caused that?
Yeah, so this actress and philanthropist, Tippi Hedren, she went to visit the camps because she felt very passionate about the community and felt very passionate about, reaching out and doing some philanthropic work. And she ended up bringing her manicurist with her and teaching.
It was just that. It was just that was all that it took was an influencer back before we used that term.
Yeah, pretty much. And so, she also helped them to get jobs in the salons in California. And then that just kind of started to metastasize. And then it was like, okay, so this person got a job here and this person gets a job there. And like, oh, we should start our own salon. And then, the proliferation as time, and migration patterns and people move away or, more people come and it's like, hey, you should do this thing. And, that kind. So it was like an outpouring. And I think that was really cool.
That is really interesting. And just for the record, I was paying attention the first time you told that story in the first segment. I was just thinking was there something more happening? But it was really just that organic growth from people making those human connections, which is really amazing. It's hard for me to wrap my head around like one person bringing along their nail artist and making connections and getting like a small group of people who then bring in other people. It like that sort of exponential growth is hard for me to wrap my head around, but that is interesting. I guess that's what makes it so surprising and fascinating.
Yeah, that's why it was surprising for me too. I was just like, oh wow, okay. Like I think I also had a similar experience. That was probably the thing that I was most surprised by. I was also really surprised by just like what people have been able to do. I get my nails done very regularly, but I think the rivers and the lakes that I swim in are much more tame than the people that I ended up interviewing. And it was just really fascinating to see what people were like, what was the edge of nails. There's this one nail artist based in Moscow, named Margarita. And she's into this thing called dirty core, which is the opposite of beautifying the nails. It's like making them look really gross and ugly. So she'll make the nails look broken or bruised or like they're deteriorating and decaying or there's fungus, which is just the exact opposite of the point of the point of a manicure. So I think that kind of manufactured, like, it just is really fascinating to me. I just find it really, really cool.
There's a delightful irony in that, in, meticulously crafting something to look distressed.
Yes.
Now, if I could, just to sort of wrap this up, if you were talking to someone, let's say a middle-aged guy who is leading a boring life and doesn't know much about nail art, fashion, really a whole lot of things, but we'll start with this area. What would you want us to know, to sort of to look for, to see, to appreciate? Like, how do you frame nail art for someone like me to recognize and appreciate what's going on there? Other than just like, it looks nice and it's technically difficult.
I think especially when you see something that feels very innovative, very fresh, or just like really exciting, to think of it as like small canvases and small art and like small expressions of the inner workings of someone's mind. I think one of the things that I found really fascinating was talking to the nail artists about their different influences, and it's really wide ranging. It'll be, I saw a leaf and I like the texture of the leaf, and so I transferred that onto the nail, or it's the birthday cakes, or someone was like, I did this whole series inspired by food. There's this artist who goes by Yes What Nails, and she was like, I kind of want it to be a restaurant on nails. And so she's making little acrylic discs that look like eggs, and she did sardines. And I also like that she's doing a lot of natural nail stuff, which is also really interesting, which is an even tinier canvas. Even though the process and the mediums are different, their minds like work similarly. Like if I've read an artist statement, there's still the same level. Sometimes there's the same level of thought. And also, nails are so ephemeral. Like, they're not necessarily meant to be permanent and forever. Though most of these like really complex sculptures are typically press-ons and not the kind of acrylics that you would see, you would go get at the nail salon and then take them off 2 weeks later. Like, they could take them off and preserve them for a little while. But I think the suggestion is that they don't last forever because they're supposed to be a new thing every few weeks if you're going to get your nails done in the world. So I think thinking of it as these kind of ephemeral pieces of art is really interesting. And what to look for, I think it's kind of, you develop your taste in nail art similarly to the way you develop your taste in anything else, like what excites you, and then just kind of moving from there. Yeah.
So after looking at this, you read quite a bit about the history of nail art. You've seen a whole lot of contemporary artists working in that medium. And you've talked about people having visions for the future of this. Like, what are you seeing as some trends? Like, if I want to be the cool guy in the neighborhood, what should I be doing to my nails?
Yeah. I think there's a slight there's like some separation between what the nail artists who are doing the cool, like the really cool, like crazy stuff, and the more like editorial things are doing, and what like I would be going to do, like for the layman's person, aka me. I think different colored nails, everything being unique. Like everybody's not just doing two hands, like both hands don't have to match, which I think was a thing before. You can do different designs on every single nail. You can do different colors on every nail, different designs on each hand. A lot of variety, I would say, something unique. Don't be afraid to personalize it. You could get your kids' names on your nails. You could do a bunch of different designs. I think having fun with it and kind of figuring out, I think just bringing the inside out or the outside in. There's a lot of like nature elements I've noticed, and a lot of metallics, which is, I think, chrome is really big elsewhere, but chrome is really, really big in nails right now. People like a lot of optical illusion things, so lots of stripes and swirls and cat eye, which you use like a magnet to create the effect, and this kind of things that look good on Instagram. People like things that photograph well, things that kind of stop people to say like, oh wait, I like your nails. Those are that. On the professional, super cool nail art people level, we're seeing a lot more like 3D printing, using and using like everyday things as appliques. Like the little like keychains that you would use if you wanted to separate your keys, like the cheap ones, someone like punched a hole in their nails and then put those on the ends of their nails as an applique. So I think people are getting really, really kind of creative with that. And also nail shape. We're seeing nail shape be before, where I think there was like a lot of limit. It was kind of limited. So you'd have square, you'd have oval, you'd have stiletto. People are going back to the duck nails, which is like a curved, flared square shape, or they're doing a nail that curls over. People are doing things that are more extreme and pushing it to its limit, which I think is really, really interesting and really cool. So yeah, I think we're going to just see more avant-garde nails as time goes on, or just more interesting looking nails.
Well, I look forward to seeing all of that out in the wild as I'm walking around. I can finally see and feel like I know a little something about fashion, and I really appreciate your sharing your insights. Once again, listeners, I would encourage you check the links in the show notes. Tembe Denton-Hurst, the book is Fresh Sets, out April 8th. Thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.